morning, colleagues. Good morning, everyone all over West Africa and beyond. Thank you so much for joining this webinar today. This is our first webinar for the year 2021 under the platform of West Africa Policy Dialogue Series, COVID-19 series specifically, which was started around May last year. So today we are looking at a very interesting theme that says COVID-19 elections and shrinking civic space in West Africa, lessons from 2020 and prospect for upcoming elections across the region. I will be co-moderating today's section with my very good colleague, Dr. Ibrahim Niang, who is a passionate democracy and human rights crusader, grant maker, and an author with solid experience in advocacy for policy reforms and influencing key decision-making processes across the continent. He is currently the advocacy manager for the Open Society Initiative for West Africa. I will invite Ibrahima later. But again, my name is Omolara Balogun, and I'm the head of Policy Influencing and Advocacy Unit of West Africa Civil Society Institute, WACSI. We're based in Accra, but we work across 18 countries, 15 ECOWAS member states, including Cameroon, Chad, and Mauritania. It's my pleasure to co-moderate this section today. You agree with me that 2020 was a very strange year for every one of us. Our world changed dramatically due to the pandemic, and every area of our life changed, from the way we work to the way we live to the way we engage. The pandemic changed everything. It also affected very important activities that we have in our respective countries, and elections being one. You also agree with me that elections period is a period that gives every one of us, both the policymakers and us as citizens, the opportunity to engage and make demands that would foster democratic development or consolidation, as the case may be. So today on this webinar, which is being co-hosted by WACSI and our partners, Civic and Oxfam West Africa to be specific, is going to be looking at interesting components of how we fared last year during the pandemic. Of course, the pandemic is still on this moment. Like I said, last year was difficult. Regardless, quite a number of countries in West Africa went on with the elections that they had. We had elections in Burkina Faso. We had presidential elections in Cote d'Ivoire. We had in Niger. We had in Guinea-Conakry. And of course, we had in Nigeria. There were a couple of state elections also in Nigeria. So the pandemic, despite the different restrictions it's brought forth, did not stop per se our democratic processes, especially elections. And most of these elections were also held in a very difficult situation. You would also agree with me that prior to the pandemic, our countries have been going through a hell of shrinking civic space. We continue to see a rise in anti-civil society government. We continue to see a rise in what do I call it? Attack on civil society and activists. We continue to see governments that have very little or zero tolerance for dissent voices. And of course, we also saw a lot of restrictions towards freedom of association and assembly, and media repression here and there, arbitrary arrest of human rights defenders across most of our countries. And through this, we were able to go on to hold our elections. Of course, we will be inviting a partner, one of our associates who worked on a piece of research looking at the intersectionalities, or I should call it the impact of COVID-19 pandemic and shrinking civic space on the various elections that we held last year in West Africa. 2021 is here. and COVID is still with us. We still have a number of restrictions, even though things have eased out a little bit in terms of movement. But of course, there's still a lot of restrictions around gathering, engagement, assemblies, and all of that. And quite a number of countries will still be holding elections this year in West Africa. We have Benin, we held that of Niger last week. We have Burkina Faso, we have presidential in Cape Verde, in the Gambia, and in Benin. So we are here to look at what are the lessons that we took from last year's elections during this very difficult period, and what are those, how can we, learn from, take those lessons to the field this year to ensure that civil society are able, citizens are able to navigate through the different restrictions that could stall democratic consolidation. So I'm going to, just to put it very simply, I don't want to talk too much. Like I said, this is a webinar that is being co-hosted by or co-organized by WAXI, Civicers, and Oxfam. So I believe my colleagues from Oxfam and Civicers should be in the room now. But very quickly, let me check if Dr. Ibrahima is in the room. Ibrahima, are you in the room?
Yes, Omolara, I am in the room.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ibrahima. And we also have in the room Ajia Rahimat Momodu, who is the head of Human Security and Civil Society Division at the ECOWAS Commission. Ajia Rahimat, we call her Auntie Rahimat. Please, are you here?
Good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm here, Amalara.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So, Ibrahima, very quickly, okay, before I call on Ibrahima, may I know if Ima is in the room? Ima, are you in the room? I guess I saw you when you joined. Ima is our partner from Oxfam. Ima is the Oxfam Regional Advocacy and Influencing Manager. Ima de Miguel, are you here? Otherwise, we'll recognize you later on. Also to find out if Paul Mulundia is in the room. Paul is the Advocacy and Campaign Officer at Civicus, and we've been working on this process together. Paul, if you are in the room, we can, we'd like to see you. Otherwise, we'll also do, give a second opportunity for that recognition and, of course, a word that you may have. Ibrahima, I think you should take the floor now before I speak for too long.
Many thanks, Omolara, and warm greetings to all distinguished hosts, speakers, and participants on this webinar today. All protocols observed. So it's really a great honor and pleasure to co-moderate this discussion convened by WAXI, Civicus, and Oxfam with you, Lara. 2020 introduced a dimension, COVID-19, that was really a shocker for us in the development world and the civil society sector. It brought about uncertainties, and it feels like we had many missed opportunities to have the robust and mutually beneficial engagements between policymakers and citizens that are usually expected around elections. As my fellow co-moderator was pointing out during a discussion we had yesterday, elections period is the only period where policymakers listen more and citizens speak more. Despite the COVID-19 and the related restrictions, many of us thought it was not a good idea for elections to proceed last year. But key elections took place in Burkina Faso, Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Guinea, Niger. Although ECOWAS provided guidelines on election management in the midst of this health crisis and decisive assistance, electoral processes, as you know, faced challenges related to inclusiveness of electoral operations, accessibility issues, lack of meaningful participation of civil society organizations, and absence of political debate, mainly in Côte d'Ivoire and Guinea. And in those two countries, the general environment around the election was polluted by the third term issue, which no one was able to prevent in the end. The result today is serious issues around legitimacy and a worrying trend of some governments that are anti-civil society and that are making the space more difficult for civil society activities to take place. And the reality is that in 2021, other governments might use the same means to silence voices and further restrict the civic space. So in 2020, we were not prepared for what happened. But in 2021, we can be better prepared to strategize ahead of time in order to address the potential challenges that the Gambia, Benin, and Cape Verde might face. So as we learned from last year, we should be thinking of means of engagement we should employ and strategies of engagements to be implemented by civil society organizations. So this should be seen as a new opportunity for civil society to strategize. So today's discussion is important because civic space conversation should transcend national boundaries. Countries organizing elections, the Gambia, Benin, and Cape Verde, will give us an update on their context and strategies to put in place in order to navigate the challenges and keep the civic space open. So Omolara, I am inviting you now to introduce the speakers.
Thank you so much, Ibrahima. Thanks a lot. I think that's for the reiterate the fact that this is an important conversation that we should be having. I specifically appreciate the point you raised around we cannot give the excuse of being met or being caught unaware. We have had to live through COVID for almost 1 year now. I mean, this started March last year. So civil society, just like so many business entities, have had to re-strategize, redesign, and redeploy their operations. I think it is important for civil society to do the same without any excuse. So thank you so much, Ibrahima. So we have a number of our senior colleagues, or my senior colleagues, because Ibrahima also happens to be a senior colleague, that will be speaking to us today. First of all, we have Madi Jubate. Madi is a human rights defender from the Gambia, focused on promoting democracy and human rights. He has worked extensively with media and development organizations in the Gambia and other parts of the continent. His interest is in human rights, civic freedom, and democracy. Currently, he is the representative of Westminster Foundation for Democracy in the Gambia. I must add that Madi has been a long life friend. I mean, I've known Madi for about 10 years, and his contribution to consolidating democracy across West Africa that I have seen is unmatched. Madi, thank you for joining us today. We also have Dr. Nadi De Souza. Nadi De Souza is a professor and researcher at the University of Santiago, Cape Verde. He is a sociologist with vast experience in socio-economic development in Africa and has worked with government and non-government organizations in Cape Verde. He's a prolific writer who has authored 3 published books and several articles on socio-economic development in Africa. Dr. Souza, thank you so much for joining us. We also have Mrs. Blandine Yaya, Sitonji Yaya, who is the National Coordinator for the Women, Youth, Peace and Security Working Group, REPESCO in Benin. She's an active member of Association of Women Jurists in Benin. She is a gender advocate, and she is involved in a lot of advocacy. So she's an advocate. She's involved in human rights, transitional justice, and peaceful conflict management. Madam Bladine, thank you if you are there for joining us for this interesting webinar today. And we also have Mr. Mamadou Seck, who is the associate who actually worked on the research that we will be looking at today. Mr. Mamadou Seck is a researcher and an analyst from Senegal. He's worked on diverse issues bordering on civic space, human rights, and advocacy. He also as pension for consultations on best approaches in managing, in conducting research in Africa. Mamadou, thank you so much for the work you've done on this piece of research and for joining us for this conversation. Last but not the least is Ajia Rahimat Momadou, who is the head of Human Security and Civil Society Division at the ECOWAS Commission. She's a youth and gender advocate, a conflict analyst, a trainer and facilitator. She has worked extensively with leading intergovernmental and international organizations, including the United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, and our background is in gender development, capacity building, governance, human rights, civil society, and strategy development. Ajia, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much. I think, Ajia, we will start with you. It's always not so easy to have people of your caliber in this kind of forum because we know you're very busy, but thank you so much on behalf of WAX's management and my executive director, Nana Afajino, who is unable to join us today. She sends our regards, by the way, to everyone. We want to thank you for taking the time to be part of this conversation. So if we can just have special remarks, like as we have put it, from you for 2-3 minutes, I think it's going to be what it's. Ajia, please, you have the floor to give your special remarks before we commence the conversation. Ajia, please check your mic.
Thank you very much, Lara. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, ma'am.
Can anybody hear?
Yes, we can hear you, and now we can see you.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yes, you can go ahead, but I think if you put off your video, the sound quality may be better.
I've done so.
All right, ma'am.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Omolara, for those kind words. And of course, I'm always available when we are talking about civil society, because that's my background. That was my beginning, as a journalist, society space. So I hope I'm being, can everybody hear me? Can I go on?
Yes, ma'am, you can go on. We can hear you.
I thought. Okay, so it comes to civil society, especially as I'm the focal point for civil society engagement at the ECOWAS Commission. So it's my pleasure to be here. When I saw the agenda last night or yesterday evening, and I saw special remarks, it took me a while. I said, what does special remarks mean? So I guess it means that first I should thank WAXI and their partners for inviting ECOWAS to this space for dialogue, and to congratulate WAXI. I think I've attended all the dialogues, the webinars series you've had, maybe except one, I'm not sure again, and to appreciate the fact that this provides the space for us at ECOWAS to engage with the non-state actors or with the civil society as part of engagement and connection. So thanks for the invitation to ECOWAS, and on behalf of my director, Dr. Sinti Kitafaugbe, we really appreciate this invitation. And just to say that today I was excited about the study which some were directed at ECOWAS, and if I remember correctly, specifically at ECOWAS and UNOAS, and I took note of the key findings regarding ECOWAS. In fact, before I got the agenda yesterday evening, I had already made my notes on, against the, it would be great to engage after the presentation of the findings of the report. And also to say that what this WACSI webinar series does is for, in my view, not just to serve as an interface for ECOWAS to know what the civil society feel, is to help, how will I call it, give a collective voice to the civil society, in one place. So I can see we are about 58 persons in this to be brought together and to discuss and hopefully to come up with a common voice and a view of what you think. In this case, in my own particular case, what you think ECOWAS should be doing, and then we can exchange what ECOWAS has been doing and what ECOWAS will do. So it's a great opportunity for us, in this regard. And I agree with the last, not Omalara, I think Ibrahima, yes, when he talked that after 1 year of COVID, it's time for us to re-strategize. We can no longer say we are still in shock, which is giving us hope that, yes, we may have a new normal, but the new normal may not be as terrible as we feared last year. So I'm happy to be here, and I look forward to the exchange later.
Thank you, Ajia. Thank you so much. I guess as you were rounding up, the internet took its toll. Thank you so much. Thank you for those kind words. It's really, we take it as a challenge and as a responsibility to always keep the space open for civil society to engage, and of course, to continue to facilitate civil society's interface with other partners, ECOWAS, development partners, donors, government. I think that is one of our prerogatives as WACSI. Thank you so much, ma'am. Ibrahima, if you permit me, I think we can just invite Mamadou Seck to spend the next 10 minutes giving us findings from his research, because it's going to serve as the foundation for our re-strategizing, if I may put it that way. Ibrahima, you have 10 minutes. I'm sorry, Mamadou, you have 10 minutes. Mamadou, you have 10 minutes now. You can start.
Bonjour, merci Omolara pour cette opportunité que vous m'offrez de pouvoir m'exprimer sur une situation qui intéresse beaucoup d'acteurs de la société civile, mais également les décideurs en général dans l'espace de la CEDEAO et au-delà. Je voudrais donc remercier WACSI pour la confiance qui a été placée en ma personne pour pouvoir échanger sur cette problématique-là. Alors, comme l'a dit mon frère Ibrahima, chers participants, tout protocole observé, je voudrais donc tout de suite, vu que le temps nous est très compté, aller vers la présentation de cette étude. Il s'agissait de documenter l'impact des mesures restrictives de la COVID sur les opérations et l'espace civique, sur les opérations civiques et l'espace civique, les libertés civiques, la sécurité humaine en Afrique de l'Ouest. Mais également examiner les implications de la COVID-19 et les degrés de restriction des processus démocratiques. Et qui dit processus démocratique parlera spécifiquement des élections qui se sont déroulées en Côte d'Ivoire, en République de Guinée, au Burkina Faso et dernièrement, donc il y a quelques jours, au Niger. Avant d'avancer, on a essayé de présenter un peu, de cerner les contours de l'espace civique, qui peut être vu comme un espace englobant l'ensemble des actions portées par plusieurs parties prenantes, dont la société civile, mais également les partis politiques. Il ne faut pas perdre de vue que les partis politiques, qui sont des espaces de socialisation, de débat, de discussion et d'échange, mais également des machines électorales pour l'accès au pouvoir, sont partie intégrante de cet espace civil-là. Et toutes ces entités portent des revendications citoyennes. Et travaillent à l'animation de cet espace. Donc, un espace civique peut être ouvert Et s'il est ouvert, ça implique que la société civile et tous ces individus, toutes ces parties prenantes-là sont capables de s'organiser, de participer et de communiquer sans entrave. Et ce faisant, d'influencer les structures politiques et sociales qui les emplissent. S'il existe des différences mineures selon les pays, on ne peut pas occulter le fait que ces espaces civiques restent une réalité et des acquis dans nos espaces, dans notre espace CEDEAO. Et on a essayé justement, sur la base d'un certain nombre de principes, de les apprécier et de les jauger. Alors, essentiellement, ici, on s'est basé sur le principe de la liberté d'association, la liberté d'expression et la liberté de réunion pacifique. Pouvoir organiser une réunion sans avoir des difficultés à pouvoir les tenir du début à la fin et ne pas être perturbé. Donc, l'espace civique est dynamique. En tout cas, nos espaces civiques dans notre espace CEDEAO, l'espace communautaire est dynamique, foisonnant et intègre une pluralité d'acteurs. Maintenant, selon la classification de Civicus, qui a beaucoup travaillé sur la problématique, un espace civique peut être ouvert, il peut être rétréci, il peut être obstrué, il peut être réprimé et le dernier niveau, le niveau le plus bas, c'est la fermeture. Un espace civique peut être totalement fermé et n'offrir aucune opportunité d'expression, aucune liberté d'expression, d'association, ni de réunion pacifique. Alors, nous avons essayé, avant d'entamer le vif, on a essayé de faire un état des lieux d'avant Covid, relativement justement à l'état de l'espace civique dans les pays concernés, c'est-à-dire la Côte d'Ivoire, la République de Guinée, le Burkina Faso et le Niger. Et au-delà de la classification qui nous a été faite par Civicus, on a eu recours à d'autres indicateurs. Par exemple, l'indice Mo Ibrahim, qui classe les pays sur la base d'un certain nombre d'indicateurs et de paramètres. On peut parler de la citoyenneté, de la participation, etc. La Guinée se positionne à la 14e place sur les 15 pays de la CEDEAO. Le Niger occupe la 11e place de l'indice Mo Ibrahim sur la gouvernance. La Côte d'Ivoire occupe la 7e place. Et le Burkina est le pays le mieux nanti, qui occupe la 6e place de l'espace, dans l'espace CEDEAO, sur les 15 pays. On a eu aussi recours au rapport Reporters sans frontières, qui nous a permis d'apprécier de manière plus large l'état de l'espace civique. Je vous épargnerai les détails vu que le temps nous est compté, mais comprenez que sur la base de ce rapport également, on voit que le Burkina Faso est un pays très bien classé parmi les 4 qui étaient concernés par cette étude. Et pour venir à l'indice Civicus, qui a beaucoup travaillé sur l'état de l'espace civique dans nos États, on peut comprendre que le Burkina Faso reste un pays obstrué de 2018 à 2020. Alors, comme je vous l'ai rappelé, obstrué, c'est la moyenne. On peut dire que c'est presque la moyenne, puisque après obstrué, après l'état de l'obstruction, on est dans la répression et la fermeture. Alors qu'avant l'obstruction, on est dans l'ouverture et le rétrécissement. Alors, la Côte d'Ivoire, en 2018, avait un espace civique obstrué. À partir de 2019, on dit que c'est un espace civique réprimé, 2020 réprimé. La République de Guinée qui passe d'un état d'obstruction à un état de répression. Et le Niger qui également passe d'un état d'obstruction à un état de répression. Ça, c'est l'état des lieux d'avant Covid. Et forcément, la situation sanitaire viendra impacter ces libertés-là, viendra contribuer à une complication de cet espace civique pour plusieurs raisons. La première, c'est que effectivement, la réduction d'un certain nombre de droits, la possibilité d'aller et de venir, beaucoup de principes ont été impactés et on a vu que ça a rétréci davantage, ça a complexifié cet espace civique qui était déjà dans des situations de fragilité et de vulnérabilité en général. Alors, et le rétrécissement de cet espace civique a induit nécessairement une tenue d'élections à minima qui n'ont pas répondu à des normes et standards internationaux partout dans ces pays qui devaient organiser des élections. Je voudrais juste m'arrêter sur un principe essentiel de l'élection qui est le principe de liberté. La liberté de pouvoir manifester, de pouvoir sortir. Vous savez, l'élection, c'est la fête de la démocratie. Et qui dit fête de liberté, la possibilité d'aller, de venir, de manifester, de donner son opinion et de participer. Alors, à partir du moment où ce principe-là a été impacté par la situation sanitaire, nécessairement, il sera impacté par la COVID durant les élections. Et qui dit impact de la liberté durant les élections parlera donc d'un niveau de participation qui sera impacté. Et donc, forcément, une légitimité qui sera étriquée. Donc, quelque part, on peut, dans une certaine mesure, dire que l'impact de la COVID sur les processus électoraux dans ces pays-là a été d'abord un rétrécissement de l'espace civique, du fait d'une réduction d'un certain nombre de libertés et donc du coup des légitimités qui en souffriront. Et on le sait, dans nos études en sciences politiques nous montrent que des légitimités étriquées feront qu'un état de grâce sera très court et qui fera que forcément on risque de voir des contestations survenir au bout d'un très court temps face aux nouveaux détenteurs du pouvoir. Avant donc d'aller vers les recommandations qu'on pourrait faire en l'occurrence sur ça, je voudrais juste, dans la perspective des prochaines élections, traiter spécifiquement les effets et recommandations à formuler. Et une approche systémique nous a permis d'élargir le spectre des effets de la COVID en Afrique. Au-delà maintenant de l'impact que ça a eu sur les processus électoraux, on a essayé d'élargir le spectre des effets en appréciant un peu ce qui s'est passé dans notre environnement. On a vu quand même une société civile qui a su répondre de manière adéquate et spontanée et volontaire. Au-delà de la participation qui a été réellement impactée, on a vu que quand même les droits de l'homme ont été sacrifiés sur l'autel d'une obsession d'embellie sanitaire. On a vu, et ça c'est un facteur positif, on a vu un patriotisme qui est contraint, si je puis m'exprimer ainsi, et un nationalisme non hégémonique, c'est-à-dire un nationalisme qui n'est pas exclusif. Tout le monde a parlé d'une seule voix, et quand on entendait le jargon de la guerre, le Sénégal est en guerre, etc., tout le monde s'est levé et a cherché à apporter une réponse, allant jusqu'à mobiliser des ressources assez conséquentes pour pouvoir apporter des réponses. Et c'est des ressources qui sont venues de partout. On a vu une sécurité humaine qui a été éprouvée également. Ici, je suis tenté de convoquer la réflexion de Sékou Sangaré, qui est le commissaire chargé des questions alimentaires à la CEDEAO, qui disait qu'on a peur de la COVID, mais on a plus peur de la faim, puisque à terme, on risque d'avoir faim, puisqu'on n'a plus l'opportunité de pouvoir nous investir dans le champ économique, dans le champ agricole, dans le champ social, etc., et subvenir à nos besoins. Donc ça, c'est un autre impact. Il est intéressant de s'arrêter sur le digital, l'impact du digital. Je pense qu'aujourd'hui même, l'exemple est passant. Le fait que ça a été quand même une alternative crédible sur laquelle désormais il faut compter. Et entre autres recommandations, je pense qu'il faudrait intégrer cette problématique-là sur les prochains processus électoraux. Comment mettre à profit le digital? Comment mettre à profit le numérique pour réduire les contacts et arriver à l'apprivoiser au profit de la démocratie africaine, excusez-moi. Et enfin, entre autres effets, le regard qu'on a eu à jeter sur les ripostes au niveau régional et continental. Je pense que c'est intéressant de s'arrêter sur ça, puisque à chaque niveau, on a des structures chargées des questions de santé et qui ont eu à apporter des ripostes, mais qui sont jusque-là à l'état de principe. Il aurait été bien que l'Union africaine, la CEDEAO, c'est un acquis. Pour une première, on a vu ce gros défi de taille interpeller le continent et l'ensemble des espaces d'intégration et de coopération. Mais on est plus à l'état de principe. On n'a pas senti l'impact sur le terrain à la base au niveau des citoyens. J'en veux pour preuve qu'on parle aujourd'hui de vaccins. la CEDEAO et l'Union africaine ne se sont pas encore prononcés sur comment est-ce qu'ils pourront contribuer eux-mêmes à faciliter, à servir de courroie de transmission aux pays qui n'ont pas les possibilités de pouvoir accéder à ces vaccins-là. Alors, je vais terminer par quelques recommandations. Ces recommandations sont tirées de l'observation qu'on a eu à faire sur l'état de l'espace civique dans ces différents pays-là, Côte d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, Guinée et le Niger. Nous pensons qu'en Côte d'Ivoire, entre autres recommandations, hein, on va être très sélectif pour ne pas trop. Alors, nous pensons qu'il faudrait des synergies très fortes et des coalitions afin de mettre en place des mouvements qui permettraient de résister face aux velléités de rétrécissement. Comme je l'ai dit, vous verrez le ballet citoyen au Burkina Faso, vous verrez le M23 au Sénégal, vous verrez d'autres initiatives très fortes et cohésives dans ces pays-là et qui ont constitué des mouvements citoyens pertinents face au risque de l'affaissement, de l'effritement de l'espace civique. En Côte d'Ivoire, on n'a pas encore cette offre-là. Il faudrait y travailler. Et étudier les possibilités aussi d'une organisation des assises de la société civile pour une clarification des principes et mettre en place un code d'éthique en Côte d'Ivoire. Au Burkina, je pense qu'il faudrait, à mon avis, poursuivre les efforts d'élargissement de l'espace civique et de consolidation des acquis démocratiques et citoyens qui datent de 2014. Et ce fut une étape clé dans le processus de démocratisation. Et enfin, nous pensons qu'il faut, face à la menace sécuritaire, puisque c'est une menace qui a impacté le processus électoral. 1600 bureaux de vote ont été fermés durant ce processus-là, durant le scrutin, face donc à la menace sécuritaire, qui peut être un facteur de rétrécissement de l'espace civique. L'État doit pouvoir impliquer la société civile dans les approches de gestion de conflits et dans les discussions pour une recherche de solutions structurelles et durables. En Guinée, nous pensons qu'il faut bâtir des consensus forts autour des déterminants essentiels du processus. Le calendrier électoral, le fichier électoral, la carte électorale, qui sont des éléments essentiels hein, pour poser les jalons d'un espace civique visible et qui présente toutes les gages d'une stabilité. Nous pensons également qu'il faut encourager des concertations nationales inclusives afin je dirais, de revisiter l'histoire, de fixer les responsabilités historiques qu'il y a dans ce pays. Il me semble que c'est un débat qui n'est pas encore vidé et ça peut impacter l'espace civique. Le Niger, nous pensons qu'il faut encourager toutes les initiatives de veille pour une meilleure implication de la société civile dans les processus politiques. Mais spécifiquement ici, nous avons fait le constat de répression, mais également d'une chasse aux sorcières qui est spécifiquement adressée aux défenseurs des droits de l'homme et des journalistes. Donc, nous pensons qu'il faut essentiellement se pencher sur cette question-là, y apporter des réponses et effectuer un plaidoyer pour une protection effective des données personnelles et lutter pour le respect des droits des acteurs de la société civile et des cyberactivistes. Étant donné que la CEDEAO est dans ce panel, bien évidemment, on a adressé beaucoup de recommandations à d'autres acteurs sous-régionaux, les acteurs d'intégration et de coopération régionale, sous-régionale, etc. Ici, nous pensons que la société civile devrait pouvoir, la CEDEAO, excusez-moi, devrait pouvoir renforcer son dispositif d'alerte précoce, davantage communiquer autour du cadre de prévention des conflits de la CEDEAO, qui est un outil extraordinaire qui nous permet de prévenir les conflits plutôt que d'aller vers des forces de maintien de la paix, etc. Et de le vulgariser ce cadre de prévention de conflits qui fait, pour chaque composante, qui a plus de 14 composantes, on a vu que pour chaque composante, la CEDEAO donne des orientations sur comment prendre en charge la composante et va jusqu'à traiter même la manière dont on devrait pouvoir évaluer la mise en œuvre de cette composante-là au niveau national. Donc, je pense que c'est un outil performant. Encore faudrait-il pouvoir le vulgariser et l'appliquer. Alors, pour terminer, je voudrais juste dire que c'est une problématique qui intéresse de plus en plus et qu'on pourrait s'inspirer d'autres expériences. Mais il faudrait bien évidemment des préalables. Est-ce que le temps nous le permet? D'ici la tenue de ces prochaines élections au Bénin, au Cap-Vert, etc. En tout cas, dans une perspective moyen et long terme, l'Afrique gagnerait à investir, à s'inspirer d'autres bonnes pratiques. Qu'est-ce qui peut nous empêcher de voter sur 2 jours, par exemple? Ça permettrait de réguler les flux. Le Niger vote sur 1 mois. L'Inde vote sur un mois, sur une durée d'1 mois. C'est parce qu'il y a une taille importante de population et pour réguler les flux, on cherche à bien gérer le flux. Mais rien n'empêche à l'Afrique, aux pays africains, d'expérimenter le vote sur 1-2 jours avec justement un préalable d'instaurer une confiance et une intégrité des opérations de vote et bien conditionner le matériel électoral. C'est dommage que, je vais en terminer là, c'est dommage que nos services postaux sont en train de mourir de belle mort et c'est le digital justement qui y contribue, mais l'expérience des États-Unis est intéressante. La Poste est un excellent support de mise en œuvre du processus électoral. Il serait bon que l'Afrique redynamise ces services postaux-là et s'en serve comme support. Et aucun de ces outils n'est exclu, c'est-à-dire qu'on fera et en même temps le physique et on utilisera ces supports-là. Voilà, entre autres, quelques expériences qu'on voulait partager. La Côte d'Ivoire a expérimenté le digital, mais c'est juste limité à l'identification des électeurs. On pourrait approfondir l'expérience en cherchant à aller jusqu'au vote de l'électeur via le digital. Bien évidemment, aucune de ces approches n'est exclusive. On peut utiliser l'approche digitale et l'approche physique. Ça permettrait de réduire les contacts et de gérer les flux d'acteurs. Donc, c'est en général, pour terminer, c'est pour dire que la problématique c'est la démocratie aujourd'hui qui est mise à rude épreuve. Parce que forcément, face à cette menace qui n'a pas encore fini de révéler tous ses secrets, je pense que il nous faudrait continuer à chercher des réponses. Et ici, c'est profondément le processus démocratique, nos processus démocratiques qui sont questionnés. Et on risque, face à cette crise-là et face au durcissement des pouvoirs, on risque de voir quelque part une démocratie qui se rétrécit parce qu'on va nier un certain nombre de droits. Donc, réponse sanitaire au détriment d'une réponse de consolidation de nos démocraties. Et donc, les réflexions doivent se poursuivre et il faudra trouver plusieurs types d'approches afin de pouvoir stabiliser nos processus de démocratisation et nos processus électoraux. Voilà ce que je voulais dire. Je reste disponible pour les questions dans les échanges. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mamadou, for this really, great summary of your findings. I think this is going to be something extremely useful for our work moving forward. So I just want to highlight a few important points mentioned by Mamadou. But I just want to also note that the report is available on WACC website, and the link will be shared again with you. So you'll be able to read the full report, the excellent report, by Mamadou. So just some very important points that Mamadou raised. So he really showed that the health crisis is continuing and has contributed to shrinking of civic space. He mentioned that there was no space for to give opinion, to demonstrate, and the impact it had on the democratic process. But he also, shared some notes of hope, when he said that we could and we should put in place a movement to strengthen civic space. And he really mentioned that the citizens should be involved in the process. And this movement could really be helpful in helping us address the issues, not only at national level, but also at the regional level. This is a very important point. And he also insisted on the fact that we need to strengthen civil society, and that it's really important to carry out advocacy measures to sensitize other actors, in civil society and also in the democratic process. He also, indicated that there are tools that can be used today to improve, the way we engage in the civic space. And he mentioned technology. He mentioned other tools that citizens can use today to ensure that the civic space is open. And these tools are even more relevant in the midst of this health crisis. And Mamadou also, indicated that there are some mechanisms that exist regionally, and civil society and ECOWAS should really work together to enhance these mechanisms. And he insisted on something that I really liked, the fact that we should invest in good practices. So those are just some points that I wanted to raise. And as I said, you can read the excellent report by Mamadou on WAXI's website, which will be shared. The link will be shared with you later. So thank you very much again, Mamadou. And I think now I will invite Mr. Madi Jobate from the Gambia to make a 10 minutes presentation. Madi, over to you, please.
Thank you. Good to be here. Ibrahim and Omara, the moderators, and Mamadou for the presentation, the report. I think I agree, with the findings, or I seem to find relevance and, associate myself with the issues that are raised, and especially as summarized by Ibrahim. Now, given the limited time, I think, I'll have to probably hit on talking points so that, we bring out the issue. I mean, I think it's obvious that, even without COVID, our governments in this region are not necessarily amenable to an open society, a vibrant civil society, groups or individuals, and particularly to, activities or actions directed towards ensuring transparency and accountability to ensure that the public sector, the state particularly, performs its obligations as required by our constitutions and the laws that they have subjected themselves to. So when instances of this pandemic, nature of this pandemic arise, the tendency is to take cover under it in order to limit popular participation to shrink the civic space, and therefore, close the society. And we've seen this across the sub-region, as it's been alluded to already. In the Gambia's particular case, we have many instances of that. I myself have led some protests, in the country, for which it was difficult to obtain the necessary permit from the police, simply because of the regulations on COVID. And as you know, like many other countries, Gambia also imposed restrictions since March 2020, and which effectively banned public gatherings. And so where citizens have a need to express themselves in terms of freedom of assembly, that has always been a tough challenge. And a lot of the time, the contradictions we face in our region is, while the government would seek to limit citizens' ability to express themselves, to assemble, we would find that the government itself is organizing assemblies, in terms of political rallies or other events that would undermine their own protocols. So we've had a lot of those instances in the Gambia. In terms of elections, we had a huge delay. We had a by-election in the country. One of the National Assembly members passed away. And it took 8 months before the election, was conducted for that region, which actually came about simply because of the outcry of people in the civil society that, it's 8 months, there has been no elections. And so eventually the election commission had to conduct an election in that region. Just, after denying them for, a representation in the parliament for 8 months or so. I think one issue that is important to highlight is issues raised in the findings, but also in the WACSI policy brief. That is the kind of attacks that we see against civil society in our region. That goes to limit, restrict civic space. And so the attacks sometimes are not from the government. They are from political parties, they are from, ordinary citizens, they are from businesses and other entities. So that if you come to the Gambia, we have this instance of activists, particularly activists for democracy, for human rights, being mischaracterized, either called names, horrible names, or being forcefully associated with another kind of group in order to discredit the activist. So we've seen this instance in which a lot of the time entities engage in that kind of misrepresentation for the purpose of silencing activists or diverting the issue, so that the issue now becomes something of a partisan nature, when actually it is a legitimate, genuine public interest issue, an issue concerning democracy and human rights. And I think the second issue I'd want to highlight also is the restricting the civic space. Sometimes it's not necessarily imposing laws or denying assemblies, but it is marginalization, or just not creating the space for involvement, as highlighted in the report. So that in the Gambia, when COVID emerged and the restrictions were done, to be democratic, it would have been better that the state would engage the different sectors of the society to ensure that these restrictions are mitigated. The impact of these restrictions are mitigated on the various groups. So for example, if you impose closure of businesses and you have market women, small scale businesses, informal businesses, and there's no engagement with that group as to how do they address the issue of the restriction or the closures, it's going to impact on them more, because these are people who go to market every day to earn a living, to survive that day, and then the next day they go back again, and so on and so forth. So, but you realize that normally those kinds of engagements are not done, or with persons with disability when it comes to restricting movement, or asking that public transport, taxis, limit the number of passengers they carry. One, it impacts on the van taxi drivers themselves, but also on, say, persons with disability in a society that does not have the necessary facilities, transport facilities, to cater for the needs of persons with disability. So ultimately, you put huge pressure on those persons. And so examples are too many. And that kind of engagement with groups that represent these various sectors of population have not been done. And so in the Gambia, the organization I lead, Westminster Foundation, we had an engagement, an assessment of the national response, and its impact on persons with disabilities, on women, on youth. And, we've had various consultative sessions with these groups, online, of course. And the findings are that all of the groups indicated that, they were not involved in the decision-making process, either from the state itself, that is at the level of the government, or at the level of the National Assembly, the Parliament, in making these legislations, or even in terms of enforcement, in the case of the police, so that if you impose a curfew, you look at the way of life of various sectors of our population, one comes to realize that there needs a lot more consideration in terms of how do you impose a curfew, how do you implement a curfew, and again, when you even arrest people for violating curfew, where do you take them? You put them in a prison, I mean, a police cell. You put them in a park somewhere. I mean, there are men and women and persons with disability and so on. How do you cater for their various needs? So there are fundamental rights issues surrounding restrictions to combat COVID, which were not considered. And so then you impose these restrictions in a way that those affected cannot now, agitate against these restrictions, which is affecting them economically, I mean, socially, financially, and even in terms of their security. So all of these issues are issues that we have seen emerge. That goes to show, again, capacity issues. To what extent does our state, our governments, our countries have in terms of addressing instances like this, when we know, of course, emergencies or pandemics may arise at any time. So I think one of the conversations we should have is moving forward. How do we make sure the state itself is in a better position, both in terms of decision-making processes, both in terms of implementation of decisions, I mean, and as well as in terms of how do you engage in that process to make sure the various sectors of the population are not affected unfairly, as a result of the decisions that will come in the wake of any emergency or pandemic that may arise. So these are issues we have found in the Gambia.
You just have 2 minutes to wrap up, please. 2 minutes.
Right. So to wrap up, therefore, I mean, I think I've almost said all I wanted to say, is to say that, this pandemic has brought out fundamentally the very challenges, the weaknesses in our governance systems, structures, in public service delivery, in the enjoyment of rights by citizens in our countries in the sub-region. And I think that needs to be looked at very well by civil society as a, and the whole advocacy needs to be done to engage the state, because we can't be in a situation where we are always reactive. I think it is necessary, and this pandemic is a lesson for us, that we need proactive states, and we need to review our governance structures to ensure that they meet democratic and human rights standards. I want to end with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madi. Thank you very much. And just very quickly, I think you mentioned two very important, points related to civil society, engagement. And, I really like the consultations with stakeholders. I guess this is also a way of assessing their needs and, being in a better position to, help them engage governments. And you also mentioned, the need for advocacy to ensure that, our states are more proactive. And I think this is very important in the midst of this pandemic and moving forward. So for the sake of time, I will just limit it to those two. And for the benefit of the group and for the next participants, I just want to also remind you of some of the guiding questions. I think it would be also good for the next participants, the next speakers, to talk about the ways civic space is compromised ahead of the upcoming elections, and also, what should really be the focus of civil society, in those countries, and if there are any best practices from elections around the region that you could share. So with that in mind, I would like now to invite Ms. Blandine Sitonji from Benin to take the floor. Ms. Sitonji, you have 10 minutes, please. Blandine? Is Blandine with us? Or maybe she's having...
Hello, Ibrahim. Yeah, she has left the call, so we can continue.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. I think I saw her at a point, Ibrahima, maybe she dropped off again. So why don't we just move on to Cape Verde, and Ibrahima, if you allow me. I'd like to invite Dr. Nadi Sosa, who is a professor at the University of Santiago, Cape Verde. Dr. Sosa, it's interesting to, and I think I want to join you in this joy, if I may put it that way, to note that Cape Verde is the only country in West Africa that has its civic space open, according to the Civic Monitor. Civic space in Cape Verde is open, which means there is room for a lot of engagement, there is interrelations and conversation going on between citizens and government, democratic processes moving on as expected. I think you may want to share with us what we should expect ahead of the forthcoming elections, I believe in March or thereabout. What is the general political climate in Cape Verde at this time? I believe COVID is still there, no matter how small it may be. Are there any potential risk we should look out for in Cape Verde this time? And what measures civil society and, of course, your institutions putting in place to ensure that the forthcoming election is going to be free, fair, and inclusive? It will be good for us to learn from that, because one of the things we are hoping to achieve, and as a way of feedback from this kind of conversation, is also to learn between and among ourselves, what works well for Cape Verde. Perhaps the Gambia, Benin, and other countries looking forward to elections can learn something from it. So, Professor Sosa, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Good morning to everybody. I will try to speak in English. I think it's better for everybody to understand.
Okay.
I will make this effort, not in Portuguese, because I think people can understand more. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Waxi for the invitation to participate in this debate on election in West Africa in this pandemic period of COVID-19. Right now in Cape Verde, we are going to start a process of 2 elections, legislative in April and presidential in September. So we are in a difficult year, which started in 2020, which brought some uncertainties and closure of some business, drop in tourism, because Cape Verde depends a lot on tourism. The government has created some support programs for companies. Some are working, and some companies saying that the negotiation with the banks are not so fast. We have 2 islands that are very touristic, Sal and Boa Vista. We saw that a lot of hotels closed the door, so a lot of people returned to their islands of origins. So you have a lot of pressure on the government. Just to remind you that this new government that achieved the power in 2016 has been in opposition for 15 years. Before this government, we had a government of PAICV that was in power for 15 years and did a lot of work in infrastructure and other things. So this government now has a lot of pressure because we have 3 years of drought and with COVID-19 and a lot of policies that they say that they would do investment, they didn't do that. And now there's a lot of pressure, and maybe there's a possibility to a change of government. So you can imagine that today there is a lot of work from the government and opposition to prepare for this election. So, as you said, in Cape Verde, civil society is very, civil society is very active, And we have this social network like Facebooks and internet that every issues is discussed in Facebook, and people are very active. So in Cape Verde, we can say that democracy is a reality. People can criticize, people can show their discontent, and it's a reality for us. But I can say that there's still a depth of constitutional culture in our political system, even in those that govern us. Because I used to summarize the Constitution in 6 principles that I think everybody, even the citizens, should know and practice. The first principle is the principle of legality. We must respect our constitutions. Sometimes we have government business and the decisions that they don't give all the information to the civil society, like the privatization of the companies, some decisions that has interest for public space. And in this new government, we have some issues like the privatization of our fly company, national company. And this is an issue that brings a lot of criticism and lack of confidence in this government. There's another issue that is the principle of equality. Sometimes some places in the government and some institutions goes to the ones that belongs to the party. So in Cape Verde, the civil society criticizes a lot the question of meritocracy. We should put someone that knows the job, has a lot of skills, and can do a better job than a simple militant of the party. Another principle is the principle of social justice. We have a lot of poverty yet. We have like 30% of population is very poor. So you see the difference between social class, and we must overturn this. We must work to put policies that take to social justice and opportunities for everybody. Other principles that we must ensure is the pluralism of ideas. If I not agree with you, you can't blame me or isolate me for that. For example, if I am very critical for the policies of the government, sometimes I don't have some opportunities. So it influences a lot the civil society, because the civil society organizations that are very close to the government, they try to repeat everything that government do or says. Even here we have a platform for NGOs. When we start the lockdown, we see the platform saying that we shouldn't criticize the government, that they are doing some efforts, but not every efforts are very good for the countries or for the population. So now we have a lot of artists, people that work in cultural industry. They have been very critical of government because we close all the showrooms. So they lose their means of life. They don't have a salary. So they start to be very critical, and they put the government in alert in order to open the showrooms and the spectacles and people in order to live, because they need the salary, they need the money. So we are in this situation now, and we can see that at the beginning with the state of emergency, some fundamental rights were reduced, such as the right of mobility. The police were given too much power to control the streets. There were many people as I told you, that link it to the government, that say that we should not criticize the government, including the representatives of the NGOs, etc., etc. But we have, in this period too, we have in some islands, some groups like in São Vicente, so-called, that have been very critical in Boa Vista, in Santiago, and we see that they put a lot of pressure in the government, and the government in these last 4 months before elections tried to make inaugurations of works and some construction in order to show that they are working for the population, to for the economy, etc., etc. And in Cape Verde, we have a very interesting thing, that we have the power of the diaspora. We have a lot of people abroad in the United States, in Europe, in Africa, and they are very active in social networks. And because they send a lot of remittance, they help a lot their families here, and the government, in terms of investment, we see that government normally gives more opportunity to foreigners, we can say Europeans and others, and our immigrants don't have maybe the same conditions, but they help a lot. They put a lot of money here. They make the industry of construction rising, and they help their families. So they are getting some conscience that they have been let out of the opportunities, even with the privatization of our flying company, that make a connect between diaspora and Cape Verde. They saw that it was made in a bad way, so they are not happy. So this make some pressure on government, and they alert their families to have another attitude, to not to be very passive. So I can say that democracy in Cape Verde is a reality. The population accepts and respects this model. Normally the parties, political parties, accept the results in the same day. When we finish election in Cape Verde, in 2 hours we have the results. Everybody accepts it, and we go on. So this is very good. But the problem is not democracy. The problem is to deepening the social justice, transparency, fighting some corruptions, etc., etc. So we have a free and fair elections, but we see that some parties try to manipulate the poorest people in the rural and urban areas to try to buy some votes, giving some materials for constructions, food, etc., etc. This is a thing that the civil society rejects, and we think our democracy will be more perfect when we finish this. And we want to finish this kind of attitude that some political parties do. And in terms of security measures, a lot of policies has been put in place, and the party should avoid great, how can I say, at rallies, a lot of crowds, because we had 5 months ago local elections, and a lot of people, crowds has been together, and this rise a little bit the COVID-19 numbers. So it's an issue that the political parties should respect, but I don't think they will respect, because they want to, the opposition want to become power, and the government that's a little weak now want to do everything to be in power, because normally a government in Cape Verde has 2 mandates. The period is 5 years, but normally when you win the legislative, you beat 2 legislatures in power. So this government has a risk of for the first time to have just one mandate. So they will do a lot of things, even bad things, in order to bad things not in violence, but try to give money for people or some things to be in power. So it's the reason why I say that our democracy is a reality, but we have some practice that we must avoid. So
we're rounding up now, please.
Yes, just to finish, yeah, the biggest risk, I think, it's if the government try to manipulate some NGOs and the local civil society organizations to try to convince them that they should be continuing power. But as the historical Amilcar Cabral said, we should be constant vigilant constant vigilance. So the positive things I see now in Cape Verde is some young people are gaining space.
Hello.
I think we lost Professor.
Wow. Okay, I'm sure we're going to pick him back. Thank you, Ibrahima. May I confirm if Madame Blandine is in the room now? Madame Blandine?
Oui, oui, bonjour, bonjour.
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 Okay, please, you can go on now. You can make your presentation for us. What is the political climate in Benin ahead of the forthcoming elections, and what is civil society doing?
Just to finish the law to put more.
Okay. All right,
yeah.
Please, you can finish up, please.
Just to finish, say that the law of parity put women in the position of eligibility. This is very good. It's changing all the issues, but the women must assume their political protagonism. So is this. But I think in Cape Verde things are going well, but we must perform social justice and transparency. But we're not so bad. Thank you. I don't know if you understand my English, but I try to make an effort.
Honestly,
Portuguese.
You speak excellent English. I should say that it's important. Your English is impeccable, it's perfect, it's clear. Even though we had made interpretation from Portuguese to English and French available, I'm sure the interpreters are excited. Thank you so much for the effort. And I mean, we can't get it wrong with a professor. We have all just been lectured on what the situation of democracy is in Cape Verde, and how you have been able to package it into 6 important areas for us to take note of. You talked about the legality, the social justice, the pluralism aspect of it, and eligibility. I think all these are what we all, aim and aspire for in our respective countries. And you also made mention of some interesting strategies that civil society, citizens in the Cape Verde have used to continuously engage our government, and I think having to seize the power of social media, which I believe other countries are now trying to do, is something that really worked well for Cape Verde. We have been monitoring the Civic monitor, and we are seeing, consistently, especially in the past 3 years or thereabout, when Cape Verde has remained open, and now we can see the tricks, the strategies behind such openness of civic space in Cape Verde. Thank you so much. I believe colleagues would have a lot of questions, especially colleagues from other countries where we expect this kind of initiative to take place among us as citizens. I recall a couple of months back in Nigeria, the NSAS protests were stopped, with force, and it's turned out to be one of the darkest days of the Nigerian citizens, for the Nigerian citizens. So there's a lot to learn. So colleagues, if you are on this webinar and you have 1 or 2 questions, be it for Mamadou, the researcher, or Professor Sosa, or for Madi, kindly put it in the chat box. We'll be taking questions very shortly. Madam Blandine, let me invite you now to tell us what the political climate in Benin is ahead of forthcoming presidential elections. And of course, what is civil society doing and how are we getting prepared? Have we been able to galvanize and mobilize for a new set of strategies to be employed as civil society to ensure that we do not only participate or include ourselves in the process, but we are having access to our various demands. So Madam Bladin, you can speak now for the next, you can make your presentation now for the next 8 minutes. Let me say 8 minutes so that we can give room to people to ask questions. Madam Blandine, I hope she is still on the call. I suspect she's been having internet challenges.
Yes, I don't see her around actually.
Okay, so I think we can, Ibrahima, we can use the next 10-15 minutes to take comments from people, questions, before we invite Ajia Raimat to give comments from ECOWAS perspectives, and especially from our office, how the kind of support that is being given to civil society to continue in democratic engagement amidst the lingering COVID-19 pandemic, and any other points that she would like to make, since we are a constituency and then we have the opportunity to engage now. So the floor is open. If you would like to ask questions, to make comments, especially if you're from countries holding elections this year, it's really going to be exciting to hear from you. So you can raise your hand. Myself and Ibrahima will be on the lookout from the list of participants, and we're also monitoring the chat box to see questions that you may have. Ibrahima, we have a couple of questions in French, so I think, since you are very bilingual, unlike myself, you may want to go through and then we can pick. Please raise your hands. I use the hand sign if you like to say something. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually don't see any questions yet. I think I'm just seeing some comments, not related to the discussion, obviously.
So do we have anyone? Go on, Ibrahima.
I was just going to invite colleagues, participants to speak up, to share any comments they may have, or, ask their questions.
Okay.
Okay. I think we have a question from, oh yeah, please go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. Sorry. You can have the first person go, and then I'll go after. This is Portia.
Yes, please. Okay, so maybe we can invite Haruna Sinyang from the Gambia. Haruna, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear.
Yes, please go ahead, Haruna.
Yes, I just want to first greet everyone and then apologize for being very late because I actually had my uncle Madi Jobate gives a lot of emphasis on the current. Sorry, are you getting me?
Yes, perfectly. We are getting you perfect.
Okay. I actually joined very late, but I had my uncle Madi who talked about a lot of issues concerning human rights in the Gambia. And then also the last speaker who also just, is it Dr. something, who also elaborate on certain issues. So I just want to ask this question to my uncle, Madi Jobate, if there is any attempt that all the civil society organizations in the Gambia that are fighting for human rights, working to make sure that they coordinate to have one umbrella body to make sure that the fighting for human rights is effectively and efficiently being done.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. Let's see if there is any other question. I think
there's another one in French.
Okay, perfect. So I think this is from is it from Saliou? Saliou Fanny, vous voulez prendre la parole? Monsieur Fanny, Saliou. Vous nous entendez, Saliou? Okay.
Okay, Ibrahima. There is a question from Isaka Wadraogo. That's one. And since we do not have Madame Blandine in the room because of internet challenges, there's another expert on Benin who is a Beninese himself.
But Omalarash is joining.
Again? Okay.
Yes, I just admitted it. Let's see. I'm sure she has joined.
Okay. So, Ibrahima, can you read the question from Isaka so that we can take note?
Okay, so I'll read it in French. Okay.
Je suis là, hein, Blandine, je suis là.
Okay, let's first take Blandine before she has connection issues. Blandine, allez-y, vous avez 8 minutes pour votre présentation, s'il vous plaît.
Ah, d'accord. Ok, merci beaucoup. Vraiment, toutes mes excuses. J'ai eu tellement de problèmes de connexion ce matin. Je salue tout le monde. Je salue Mamadou, que je suis heureuse de revoir ici. Et comme vous le savez, le Bénin, avant 1990, était un pays révolutionnaire. Et il y a eu la conférence nationale des forces vives. Et depuis lors, nous sommes rentrés dans l'ère de la démocratie. Et là, vraiment, tout a commencé à marcher normalement. Nous avons des institutions qui ont été mises en place et qui fonctionnent normalement. Nous avons des lois électorales inclusives. Nous avons aussi des élections inclusives avec l'alternance au pouvoir. Nous sommes actuellement à notre 4e président d'ailleurs. Donc, tout se passait normalement. Tout le monde était associé, tous les acteurs de la société étaient associés à la prise des lois. Et à l'Assemblée nationale, nous avons les membres de l'opposition et de la mouvance. Au niveau des conseils communaux, c'est la même chose. Nous avons des acteurs politiques de la mouvance et de l'opposition dans toutes les institutions où il y a des élections. Mais comme vous le... Enfin, je ne sais pas. Mais depuis que le président actuel est là, je peux dire que les choses ont changé. J'espère que je peux parler en toute liberté ici et ne pas être poursuivi après. Parce que ce qui se passe actuellement au Bénin sort vraiment de l'entendement. Vous avez suivi les élections passées dans notre pays depuis que le nouveau régime est là. Pour les élections législatives de 2017, à quelques semaines des élections, la Cour constitutionnelle a rendu une décision où tous les partis devraient avoir un certificat de conformité. Et c'est un long processus. Et finalement, ce sont les partis de la mouvance qui ont pu avoir ce certificat. Parce qu'il y a eu tellement de problèmes avec les autres partis qui ne sont pas de la mouvance présidentielle, si bien que ce sont les partis qui soutiennent les actions du chef de l'État qui ont pu avoir ce certificat de conformité. Et finalement, c'est 2 partis seulement qui sont allés aux élections, 2 partis de la mouvance, si bien qu'aujourd'hui, tous les députés de l'Assemblée nationale sont de la mouvance. Ce qui est vraiment dommage pour notre pays. C'est exactement ce qui s'est passé aussi avec les élections communales, où c'est 3 partis qui ont pu avoir des conseillers communaux. Et il y a les 2 partis qui étaient aux élections législatives et la FCB, le parti de l'ancien chef de l'État, Boni. Mais aujourd'hui, tout le monde a compris que c'est le 3e parti du pouvoir en place. Donc, c'est les 3 qui ont eu des conseillers communaux. Et dites-vous que normalement, selon les lois électorales, le maire est désigné par le conseil communal. Mais en plein processus de ce vote, les députés sont retournés à l'Assemblée et ont voté une loi. Et maintenant, ce sont les chefs de parti qui désignent les maires. Ce qui est encore dommage pour notre pays. Parce que les citoyens élisent le conseil communal. Très bien. Merci. Merci vraiment pour cette question. La société civile, nous rencontrons tous les acteurs politiques et tous les organes chargés de la gestion des élections. Nous rencontrons tous les partis, les responsables des partis politiques. En 2017, nous avons rencontré le chef de l'État lui-même qui nous a dit, voilà, je vais citer exactement ces mots, il n'y aura pas d'élection monocolore pendant que je serai au pouvoir. Mais la semaine qui a suivi, on a constaté que l'opposition a été carrément écartée. Donc, la société civile fait du plaidoyer en direction de tous les acteurs impliqués dans les élections, également en direction des responsables des partis politiques. Et pendant les élections, nous mettons en place la case de veille pour pouvoir faire le monitoring des élections. Et nous élaborons des rapports que nous publions. Donc, la société civile ne reste pas les bras croisés. Nous sommes tout le temps en mouvement, en train de rencontrer tel membre, tel parti, telle autorité, tel responsable, en train de faire des plaidoyers dans tous les sens pour que tout se passe bien, pour que chaque organe joue pleinement son rôle, pour qu'il n'y ait pas d'élection exclusive, pour qu'il n'y ait pas de violence. Et nous avons d'ailleurs commencé nos activités avec l'appui de quelques partenaires. Nous avons démarré les activités jusqu'à après les élections, puisqu'il y a des activités post-élection également. Donc, nous sommes en train de mener actuellement des activités. Donc, voilà ce que la société civile fait. Nous nous battons beaucoup, mais les résultats sont là, puisque nous n'avons pas le pouvoir de décision. Nous ne pouvons que faire des plaidoyers, mais nous le faisons partout et à l'endroit de tous ceux qui peuvent aider à avoir des élections inclusives, à avoir, pour que les choses ne dégénèrent pas, qu'on arrive à des violences. Vous avez suivi également les violences au Bénin, ça ne s'était jamais passé. Mais en 2017, il y a eu des violences. 2019, il y a eu des violences au Bénin avec des morts. Voilà.
Merci beaucoup, Blandine. Alors, avant de continuer, nous voudrions juste donner la parole à notre collègue Léandre Banon pour une contribution. Léandre, vous avez la parole.
Merci beaucoup, M. Ibrahima. Merci à tous nos frères et confrères, en fait, qui sont intervenus à différents niveaux. En fait, j'ai 2 questions. ma contribution s'aligne beaucoup plus à une question. Je pense que la situation du Bénin maintenant peut être décrite comme une situation où nous sommes en perte de vitesse au vu de la situation réelle sur le terrain. Et je le dis beaucoup pour m'aligner peut-être à l'introduction de M. Ibrahima qui disait au début qu'en 2020, nous n'étions pas préparés, nous, la société civile, et il y a eu des manquements, des élections exclusives et autres. Mais je ne sais pas, Bénin en 2021, nous sommes en train de nous préparer pour mieux affronter les situations en fait plus ou moins similaires de 2021. Mais je peux déjà dire que peut-être pour le Bénin est déjà hors de portée en termes d'action. Et ma question serait peut-être de savoir qu'est-ce que nous voulons faire maintenant pour répondre à la situation, nous en tant que société civile. Et aussi, quels mécanismes pouvons-nous peut-être mettre en place pour essayer de coordonner nos actions, pas seulement au niveau national, mais beaucoup plus au niveau régional. Parce que nous avons constaté maintenant, il y a aussi ce soutien qu'ils obtiennent entre eux présidents. Quand un président est mal élu et que la population vient descendre dans la rue, vous allez voir que les autres présidents de la sous-région essaient rapidement d'émettre des communiqués de félicitations, des mots de félicitations pour essayer de légitimer la personne au sein de la CDA et autres. Donc, nous, les organisations de la société civile, nous, les citoyens, comment pouvons-nous aussi agir? Parce que s'ils arrivent aussi à agir au niveau régional, il nous faut aussi maintenant agir aussi à ce niveau-là. Au Bénin, je peux vous dire que tous les ingrédients sont en place pour une sélection, non une élection. Donc, comment allons-nous agir maintenant? C'est surtout là ma question pour les panélistes, pour essayer aussi d'avoir leur avis dessus. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Léandre. Une question extrêmement pertinente. Alors, nous allons donner la parole à Franck. Ce sera la dernière question. Et après, nous allons revenir aux intervenants pour qu'ils puissent répondre un peu aux questions. Franck, vous avez la parole.
Merci bien, Dr. Nyang, et merci à tous les panélistes. Ma question va particulièrement à M. Mamadou Seck pour sa présentation de recherche. Ça a été une bonne présentation. Je voulais qu'il puisse nous aider à établir une séparation entre les effets de la crise liée au COVID et les mesures restrictives prises par les États dans le cadre de l'organisation des élections. Je mentionne cela parce que je veux penser qu'on ne pourrait pas nécessairement attribuer au gouvernement la responsabilité de certaines mesures préventives liées à la crise de COVID en concluant que l'espace civique est restreint. Il faut être capable de pouvoir démarquer ce qui relève de la responsabilité du gouvernement en termes d'actions restrictives comparé à la gestion de la crise de COVID qui, pour ma part, peut-être, quand on entend les dernières recommandations qu'il a faites, il a pu souligner certaines suggestions, à savoir, par exemple, de considérer l'amélioration des services de la poste et puis également la possibilité d'étendre les élections sur plus d'une journée, à savoir au moins 2 jours. Mais à part ces mesures conservatoires, quelles mesures ou actions spécifiques ont été posées par les différents gouvernements qui mettent à mal l'organisation des élections et pour lesquelles l'espace civique se dit être restreint comparativement à aux retombées de la crise de COVID? Merci.
Merci Franck. Alors, nous avons des questions donc pour Madi, pour Mamadou Seck et pour Blandine. Et donc, Blandine, je vais juste vous lire un peu la question de Isaka, qui vous demande aussi, est-ce que le système comment dire, quelles sont les recommandations qu'on peut faire pour renforcer la société civile face à leur collusion avec les partis politiques, ce qui les rend moins crédibles? Et il se pose aussi la question à savoir, est-ce que cette société civile aujourd'hui est unie et si elle peut influencer les choses? Donc ça, ce sont des questions pour Blandine. Donc peut-être que nous allons commencer avec Blandine. Si vous pouvez répondre à toutes les questions qui vous sont posées en 2 minutes. Après, nous passerons la parole à Madi et à Mamadou. Blandine, vous avez la parole. En 2 minutes.
Merci beaucoup. Oui, j'ai dit, la société civile a mené beaucoup d'actions, mais nous n'avons pas le pouvoir de décision. C'est le problème, en fait, c'est le gros problème, ça. Parce que tout ce que nous pouvons faire, ce n'est que des plaidoyers. La décision revient aux gouvernants. Mais quand ils vous promettent des choses, c'est autre chose qu'ils font. Et on n'a pas autre pouvoir pour faire autre chose. Vous voyez que des plaidoyers. Donc, ce que moi je voudrais dire, c'est que les partenaires nous appuient quand même pour que nous puissions faire ces activités, pour que nous puissions mener ces activités avant, pendant et après les élections. Mais et les plaidoyers aussi que nous faisons. Mais on ne peut que s'arrêter là. On n'a pas autre chose à faire. On n'a pas de pouvoir de décision. Vous voyez, donc si on nous appuie, si on continue de nous appuyer, nous allons mener les activités. Mais la décision leur revient, vous le savez très bien. Voilà ce que je peux répondre.
Merci beaucoup, Blandine. Alors, Madi, est-ce que Madi peut prendre la parole, s'il vous plaît, et répondre aux questions?
Oui. The question.
I think Madi will join us in a few minutes, so we can move on to Dr. Sousa.
Okay, Dr.
Okay,
Sousa.
I understand. Sorry, Madi, Nardi. No, I can wait. I can wait. There's no problem.
No, but please, Dr. Sousa, please, would be happy to hear your insight.
I think the question for me was from Mr. Frank Sombo. I don't know if I understood very well, but he talks about the responsibility of government and the responsibility from COVID-19 in terms of measures. Yes, if I understand these questions, I think it's a very interesting question because COVID-19 can change a lot of things, but the weakness we have in democracy is before COVID. It came far a long way. And as I told you about the principles, the 6 principles of the constitutions, that even our politicians sometimes do not respect or accept fully, I think we should reflect on the responsibilities of civil society, the responsibility and government, and the challenge that COVID-19 bring to us. In Cape Verde, for example, we think that our electoral code must change to give access to a group of citizens that can participate in legislative. Because in our electoral code, only political parties should participate. And we could change it a lot if we do this change in order to give civil society access to parliament. If we do this, I think everything will change. Because I think the bipartidarism is not so good for us, because you have 2 parties that control the power, and even economic issues. So if you allow citizens to participate and to have access to power, I think everything will change in this way. And civil society wants this change in the electoral code, and we have to fight for this. Because if you don't think in terms of political parties, you don't have access to the parliament. So this is not good, you know?
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Yeah. Mamadou?
Oui, Ibrahima. Alors, pour répondre à la question, je pense que nos États ont manqué d'inventivité et d'ingéniosité face à la COVID. Les réponses ont été pratiquement les mêmes dans tous nos États. Ça a été couvre-feu assorti d'état d'urgence. Bon, on a eu quelques relents de manifestations d'état-providence, si je puis m'exprimer ainsi, puisque certains États ont essayé quand même de pourvoir en ressources, distribution de riz, prise en charge de quelques factures d'eau, d'électricité, etc. pour leurs citoyens. Mais de manière spécifique, face à la COVID, et pour répondre à la question aussi, il faut savoir que bon, c'est un rapport qui est assez long. On n'a pas pu tout présenter, on a essayé d'être sélectif. Mais vous verrez que, entre autres, au-delà des effets que j'ai évoqués tout à l'heure, je pense que pour ce qui s'agit des processus électoraux, nos États n'ont rien proposé comme alternative. Les États qui ont organisé des élections ont organisé en se drapant juste de discours, pas de contact, etc., mettez les masques, mais on n'a pas cherché à apporter des réponses structurelles face à la COVID pour répondre à la question. Donc, si on série, on peut dire que les réponses ont été quelque part classiques, couvre-feu, assorti d'état d'urgence, etc., et quelques appuis. Et spécifiquement sur les processus électoraux, il n'y a pas eu de réponse structurelle. Raison pour laquelle, justement, j'ai essayé d'explorer quelques bonnes pratiques d'un peu partout pour qu'on puisse s'inscrire dans une dynamique de réponse dans le long terme, puisque cette COVID-là, on n'a pas fini de la gérer de manière définitive. Donc, il faudra vivre avec, comme disent certains, et essayer de trouver d'autres alternatives. Je ne sais pas si j'ai apporté les réponses. En tout cas, l'un des effets immédiats, pour ne pas parler d'impact, puisque l'impact peut s'inscrire dans un plus long terme et puis est le fruit de l'agrégation de plusieurs réponses, non pas seulement notre réponse, mais plusieurs acteurs vont apporter plusieurs réponses et c'est l'agrégation de ces effets-là qui nous permettent d'apprécier l'impact. Mais parlant d'effets immédiats, on peut dire que éventuellement, c'est la participation qui en a pris un coup, parce que certains ont préféré ne pas aller aux élections, ne pas aller voter, de peur d'être contaminés. On a vu aussi, symboliquement, c'est l'image de certains processus électoraux, symboliquement, qui peut être affecté. Je prends l'exemple du président de la CENI de la Guinée.
I'm sorry to cut you, but we can't get anything in English. Interpreters, what is going on, please? There was no interpretation, so I thought it was only my channel, my computer, but I understand many people don't have the English interpretation. Interpreters, please, are you there? Could we have lost the interpreters too? Technology.
Technology, yeah.
Yeah, so I think, so this is unbelievable. Or could you guys, were you able to hear what Sek was saying in English? Can anybody confirm? Interpreters.
I think we've lost them.
Now we can, but you were off for like 4 minutes. We didn't hear anything. So, all right, so Sek, if you can just please take those last points again. We apologize for that break.
Je vous en prie. Je vous en prie. I'm sorry, my English is bad, so I would
No, allez-y en français.
Myself in English, but I would have some problems. I'll have some problems. Alors, c'est pour dire que spécifiquement, nos États n'ont pas fait preuve d'inventivité et d'ingéniosité. Ils ont été presque dans le copiage. Dans tous nos États, on a fait des réponses couvre-feu assorties d'état d'urgence. Et bon, certains États un peu plus nantis, organisés, ont cherché à prendre en charge certains besoins courants de leurs citoyens, mais ça a été les réponses, les effets, et en plus des effets que j'ai évoqués tout à l'heure dans ma présentation. Maintenant, de manière spécifique sur les élections, pour apporter une réponse à la question, il n'y a pas eu de réponse adressée aux processus électoraux face à cette COVID-là en Afrique. On n'a pas cherché à apporter des réponses. J'ai été co-directeur d'une mission d'observation. J'ai co-dirigé une mission d'observation au Burkina Faso, mais hormis le masque qu'il fallait porter et la distanciation physique, il n'y a pas eu de réponse, il n'y a pas eu de support structurel proposé par les États face à cette COVID-là. Tant en Côte d'Ivoire, en République de Guinée, qu'au Burkina Faso. Et Niger, c'était il y a 3 jours. Si vous voyez, même l'absence de réponse éventuellement l'impact, l'effet qu'on peut soulever, c'est du point de vue de la participation. c'est le seul niveau sur lequel on peut, c'est le seul indicateur que l'on peut mobiliser pour apprécier l'éventuel effet, les éventuels effets de cette COVID-là sur les processus électoraux, la participation. Et comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, ça peut contribuer à effriter une légitimité et donc la mise en œuvre des politiques publiques risque d'en souffrir. Voilà globalement ce que je voulais dire. Mais nos États, c'est pour ça d'ailleurs que j'ai fait quelques propositions pour dans une perspective de moyen-long terme, puisqu'on n'en a pas fini avec cette maladie-là, c'est clair. Donc, que nos États essaient de piquer de bonnes pratiques d'ailleurs pour pouvoir justement se les approprier et les domestiquer afin qu'on puisse au moins proposer d'autres alternatives pour consolider nos processus politiques et électoraux.
Merci. Merci beaucoup, Mamadou. Madi?
I'm sure Madi is not back, Ibrahim. Okay. So I'm sure he will join us back. We're probably going to take a few more of your time, colleagues, so please pardon us. I think at this point, before we have a number of questions to also take, but let me use this opportunity. Let me invite Ajia Raimat at this point. Some of the presentations and questions that have been thrown, have been asked on the floor is talking about what the regional institution like ECOWAS, I mean, a lot has been said for ECOWAS to do, but I think it may be important now to hear from you, Ajia, on the strategies that ECOWAS has put in place to mitigate potential risk. I think last year, ECOWAS was present across countries holding elections to observe these elections. Are there lessons that ECOWAS as an institution observing election across the countries has learned and would like to share so that civil society can take note of them? At the same time, we would also like to know what the plans are or what measures ECOWAS is putting in place to regionalize the civic space conversation. You would agree with me, Auntie Raimat, that shrinking civic space has become the order of the day across all our countries, maybe for with the expression of exclusion of Cape Verde that still remains open based on Civicus Monitor. And finally, are there best practices that you noted in the course of observing elections across the 4 or 5 countries that held elections last year? Auntie Raimat, would like to hear from you now. Please, you have the floor. And then we come back to some of the questions. Please keep the questions coming. We're taking notes of them on the chat box.
Okay, thank you very much, Omolara. I hope this line is better. I had to change the source of my internet connection. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, please, we can.
Okay.
It's clear.
Yeah, it's clear. Thank you very much. Based on the agenda that I received yesterday, it says it sent 4 questions to explore. And the first question that I have is, what strategies has ECOWAS put in place to mitigate potential risks to health, peace, security, and democracy of the region? And my first comment would be that in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm sure you all know that our anchor organization is the West African Health Organization based in Burkina Faso, and that even the report captured it. But what I realized, the report underreported what ECOWAS and WAHU has been doing. So that shows that there's a communication gap and that ECOWAS needs to do more, to be able to put out the many things that are being done. So I noted that in the report. And just to say that right from as early as April, we had to reprogram our activities to April last year. As you recall, I think most of ECOWAS countries locked down around March, at least Nigeria, where ECOWAS headquarters is based, locked down, I think towards the end of March or thereabout. So it was around the April, we were all instructed to reprogram our 2020 activity reflecting COVID-19, which was done, ECOWAS-wide. So since then, we have been programming and implementing activities with the full reflection of the impact of COVID-19 on the citizens and on our programming. That also shows, I also think, just before the lockdown, I remember, just before the lockdown in March, ECOWAS was quite proactive. ECOWAS procured what I would call unlimited access of Microsoft Teams and Business Zoom. As you know, Microsoft Teams does not support interpretation, so but Business Zoom does. So as we speak, all staff of ECOWAS, we have a limitless access to online meetings. So we call online meetings. You don't have to go even through the Department of IT because we all have the access on our PC and we can. So that also meant that our programming, our activities were not disrupted, maybe just for the first 2 weeks, we're not disrupted at all. We turned some of our activities online, and we continue with our programming last year. And even this year, we're already in the thick of implementing our carryover activities from 2020 and that of 2021. One of the main role, or what is ECOWAS role and what ECOWAS did pretty well last year, was the development of tools to engage with member states so that they can reflect the impact of COVID-19 on their response to COVID-19 and proactively towards the recovery from COVID-19. So, and these tools, and this is where ECOWAS has a comparative advantage. When I was listening to Mamadou, he said it a couple of times that ECOWAS has guidelines, ECOWAS has mechanism. And I think that is where we should take off from. For us, when I say us, ECOWAS and civil society organization, to engage with ECOWAS and ECOWAS to engage with civil society organization based on these guidelines, on these texts that are there. So we developed technical guidelines to member states, and many directorates did rapid assessments. There was joint advisory studies were carried out last year and are being carried out. There was a president's statement, for example, against gender-based violence and violence against children, when it became very apparent that gender-based violence was a shadow pandemic to COVID-19 and that we needed to focus on. So we have all these, even political declaration. We had political declaration last year against gender-based violence, again by the heads of state. So these tools are available as the means of engagement between ECOWAS and the member states, and more importantly, between the civil society organizations and their member states. Yes, there has always been a provision from an annual meeting with civil society organization. It's not taking place in the last 2 years because coming on board and being put in charge of civil society engagement, I realized that there was a need for us, when I say us, ECOWAS, to really have a very structured form of engagement, an institutionalized structure of engagement with the civil society. So, and that's what we are doing currently. As some of you may be aware, we are in the process of developing an ECOWAS non-state engagement strategy, which at the end of the day, we believe I don't want to use the word transform, but that's my own hope, is to transform that engagement, the space between ECOWAS and the civil society organization, non-state actors. There are other activities that were done last year. So we continued, we even went into new partnership. For example, my division secured a new partnership with United Nations Office to the African Union, and we did a couple of activities. There were new interventions in the area, in terms of securing civic space, in terms of consolidating that engagement. There is a huge project that ECOWAS that is being implemented by WANEP and ECOWAS that is funded by UNDP Regional Office. We also have 2 additional programs that are funded by the EU and the government of Germany that is being anchored or implemented by GIZ. The first one is what we call Okwati Project, Organized Crime, West African Response to Trafficking. And in there, we have the civil society oversight mechanism and network that will be is being established. And we have the research component, which also involves our researchers, all over the region. And as I speak, we are at the point of finalizing the ECOWAS Regional Social Protection Framework, which we hope should speak to all these issues about safety net as social protection, because what the COVID did was to expose the leadership crisis, and I think it's my brother from the Gambia that said it very well, the leadership crisis, the capacity crisis, within our member states. People always talk about political will. I always talk about bureaucratic will and capacity. Even if there's a political will with the relevant text signed, especially at the ECOWAS level, usually member states' bureaucracy sometimes do not have the capacity to implement. Not that they don't want to implement. Even when they are interested in implementing, they may not have the capacity to do so. And the COVID-19 has further exposed the institutional weaknesses of our national government. So that's will be my response to that. The second question is, how is ECOWAS working with civil society on issues of civic space governance amidst the pandemic? Of course, we have the Human Security and Civil Society Division, which I heard that came to bear in our new organogram, no longer new because we started operationalizing this organogram January 2019. So there is a division that deals with civil society engagement, and that's why one of the first things I wanted to do was to have a better and a structured engagement that will be legitimate, that will be legal, that will serve the purpose of both ECOWAS and the civil society organization. And it is important to know that engagement with civil society, ECOWAS engagement with civil society is mainstreamed in our regular programming. So I am sure a lot of you will know that one of the best practices from ECOWAS to the rest of the continent is that we have robust engagement with civil society on sectoral basis. So yes, there is the division for civil society engagement, but before then, every directorate engages with their relevant stakeholders in the civil society. So that has been the beauty of ECOWAS engagement, engagement with civil society. What the new strategy seeks to do is to coordinate it at the ECOWAS end, and hopefully for the civil society to be more coordinated so that it will be easier for ECOWAS to interface with a body of civil society that is legitimate, that is accepted by as many civil society organizations as possible, so that when ECOWAS is engaging with that body, we are hearing the common voice of the civil society, which for me is missing, which is something I don't know whether the report brought it out very well, that there is a need for us to have a more consolidated, civil society space or actors in such a way when they speak with one voice, and it will be very difficult for ECOWAS or any other international body not to listen to that consolidated voice. I've talked about that, and the directorate that deals in particular with the elections in ECOWAS is the Department of Political Affairs, which has the Elections Assistance Unit, has the division on Election Assistance Division, and then has the division on good governance and democracy. Just to say that there was never any disruption, activities went on, and like I said, reflecting the impact of COVID-19 on our democracy activities. I spoke to my colleagues, and that was, the message I got back. If you recall, in spite of the lockdown and the restricted movement, ECOWAS was still able to monitor election last year, was still able to do fact-finding missions, was still able to deploy special envoys. We saw the former president of Nigeria, His Excellency Goodluck Jonathan, going to Mali more than 2-3 times last year, and ECOWAS has just monitored the Niger election. So to a very large extent, what the regular programming of ECOWAS was not adversely disrupted, based on the COVID. So we also were involved in the support for civil society networks. As we speak, we have funding under the second project that is being funded by the EU.
2 more minutes so that we can.
So the activities are ongoing. There is a funding for support to the Electoral Assistance Division, which also is to ensure that there is no disruption on, what ECOWAS does normally in the area of democracy and the elections. The other question was, what are the plans on safeguarding civic space before and during? I've just told you there was no disruption. The impact of COVID-19 has been reflected in all our programming, including that of elections. There's also the ECONEC, which is the ECOWAS network of electoral bodies that, as you know, is very active. They are quite active in the area of sharing experiences, influencing each other, and providing the technical support to each other. In terms of what are the best practices, my comment will be, that is the question for all of us to answer here. From your experience, what are the best practices? It's not for ECOWAS to say the best practices. What are the best practices? How well have civil society be engaging with their national government, and to ensure that the civil space is not restricted. And I also want to say that now there's a bit of good news. ECOWAS has finally deployed what we call resident representative to all the 15 member states. Somebody is speaking, can you hear me? So ECOWAS has finally deployed 14 resident reps, except Nigeria, and this... Somebody is speaking Ghana English there, so it has to be from your head, Waxy. And then
please hold on. I guess there is somebody's mic is on. And
yeah, somebody's mic is on.
Mr. Setonji.
Confirm is Ghana English.
There is Ghana English, definitely. So okay. Okay, sorry. So, the person is really engaging in discussion. So in conclusion, for me and for ECOWAS, safeguarding the civil space is a collective responsibility to be driven by the citizens themselves, asking for transparency and accountability from their national government, and of course in collaboration with organizations like ECOWAS and UNOAS and the other intergovernmental bodies that provide that facilitation and that support. Going through, some of the ways to safeguard this civic space include assessing information, engaging in dialogue, which is what we are doing, and Waxy, congratulations again, expressing dissent or disagreement, and joining together to express their views. And this is what I have said before. I think these are the anchors of what the civil society should be doing, and with ECOWAS and with their member states, and we are here to support these processes. For me, herein lies the critical role of civil society organizations and non-state actors and organizations like ECOWAS. It is a two-way street. So we talk to you, you talk to us, but more importantly, please consolidate your views as civil society so that it will be very easy for us to interface. And thank God, part of the discussion for the development of the engagement strategy with ECOWAS is retooling WACSOF, so that we will truly have a body that we can interface with that is broadly accepted and legitimate. Thank you very much.
talks about the program.
Thank you so much, Ajia Raimat, who is the head of Civil Society Division at the ECOWAS Commission. Thank you for those insightful words and recommendation as well. Some of the points that I noted during the chat, I know we have a lot of questions for ECOWAS, and maybe we still have some for the speakers. We have 15 minutes to close this meeting. Again, let me reiterate here that we apologize for shooting beyond our time. You will agree with me that quite a number of speakers had internet challenges, hence this extension in timeline. So thank you, Ataramat, once again. When Dr. Sosa was speaking, he mentioned that one of the things that worked for them in Cape Verde is that they have a social media platform where everything happening in the country is discussed. And I want to believe, the doc, I'm not sure you mentioned that, I want to believe this platform had been in existence prior to COVID. So it's made your engagement even during COVID a lot easier than for some of us who do not have a consolidated platform, you know, where we converge to discuss. So I believe in terms of moving forward, this will be a strategy. This should be a strategy that every one of us should adopt across our countries. And we have quite a number of platforms to do that. I know in countries we have civil society umbrella bodies, there's ECOWAS platform there's NGOs, collective platform. In Nigeria it's called the LNNGO. In Ghana we have the civil society platform on SDG. So a platform that actually brings together different civil society. All we have to do is transforming or moving this platform to to become virtual for us to continue engagement. Somebody asked a question to the Benin, and I thought it's very important. After Madame Blandine presented, the question I noted was, what is the capacity of civil society to engage? And I think this question should go to all our countries. We are talking about having to move our conversation virtually. We are talking about having to engage. Please, can we check our mics? I can still hear some background noise. Okay. So we're talking about continual political engagement with the minimal means that is open to us in a pandemic like this and amidst shrinking civic space. Where are the people that will be doing that? Which platform are we going to be using to do that? How do we do that? How many civil society organizations? There's a report that we all used throughout last year from Epic Africa that really talks about the number of civil society organizations that had to shut down simply because of COVID. So how do we get the voice of these categories of civil society into the conversation? And I think this is a challenge to countries that will be holding elections this year. The Benin, the Gambia, the Senegal, and so on. What channel of conversation are we introducing now, if it's not already too late? What channel of conversation are we introducing? What strategies are we putting in place to engage between and among ourselves to consolidate our decisions? Like Ajia Raimat said, I think one of the challenges we've always faced as civil society is that we speak to ourselves in silos. Everybody's speaking to people working in its thematic fields. And when it's time for us to have a convergent or consolidated point of views, we are all over the place. So what measures are we putting in place in Benin to consolidate our points, our demands, and what channel are we also using to use those points to engage? I think these are important points for successful advocacy, and we should be doing that already. I think also that COVID is not going to leave now. So I don't want to be negative, but I think most of the elections, if not all, till December, that we are going to be holding this year will still take place within the pandemic, arena, and of course with continuous shrinking civic space. And Raymond, maybe one question for you. I would like to know what is shaping the conversation around civic space within ECOWAS now. When I say ECOWAS, I mean the Commission. I know things, developments are taking place across the countries, and most of them have been negative. I don't know whether, I would like to know whether this has ever a feature. We don't have opportunity to feature or to participate in the Heads of State Summit. I know you, being an insider, you have access to that. But is this something that is already coming up on the Head of States Summit agenda in terms of the decadence of civic space, or the shrinking, if I may use the popular term? I think I want you to speak to that. And if nothing, I think one of the feedback we are getting from people ourselves is that this civic space conversation needs to become a regional agenda, because across all the countries, the threats continues. And if civil society actors are unable to hold their respective government to account, like we noticed, we saw in Cote d'Ivoire, in Guinea, where the dissent voices were completely repressed, we should be able to have this kind of conversation at the regional level where all the governments will be there. So we don't know if this is one of the agenda that your department is pushing on behalf of civil society, since you have access to this leadership, the summit. I would like to hear about that. So colleagues, now we are going to spend the next 5 minutes for actions. Action on advocacy. So if you have any action you think we should take on, be it as WACSI or as civil society across countries holding elections, this is a time to drop it in the chat box or raise your hand. But let me call Auntie Raimat first, in case she would like to respond to that question around regionalizing civic space conversation at the ECOWAS level. Auntie Raimat, you have 1 minute.
Thank you very much. I think I thought I had responded in my presentation. There will be nothing like a project of regionalizing civil space, because for us, the civil society and the civil space, protection is decentralized in all our programming. That's the point I made. So you're not going to have a new project now and call it protection of the civil space, when it is embedded in all our text. It's in our ECOWAS complete prevention framework, is in our revised treaty. That was why I said, and I keep repeating it, it is on the basis of these ECOWAS text guidelines that the civil society should hold their national governments accountable and should engage with us. So I'm not going to say, oh, there's a new project called that, when that's precisely what I'm doing. With the development of a new strategy, what are we discussing? Why are we doing a new strategy for a structured and institutionalized engagement at the global level with ECOWAS, in such a way that the civil society's voices will be heard at any time based on that? So I don't see anything. Again, there's one forum that we're planning. Is for night. It's called the West African Peace and Security Innovation Framework. We already started a research before the framework. So these are the different spaces that ECOWAS is providing. So that's what I have to say. It's something that we've been doing. It's something that we've increased the tempo, but we're not going to create a special project called regionalization of the civil space, when it's precisely what we are doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Auntie Raimat. I wouldn't want to belabor that point. Maybe my question didn't come out so strongly. Not necessarily from a programmatic a point of view, but more of policy. But part of your comment addressed it, that you're already implementing it within your programs, your texts at the ECOWAS level. But we still feel that ECOWAS should be at a point where it can begin to hold its member states accountable, especially where things get completely degenerated, like we witnessed in Cote d'Ivoire, in Guinea, and in Mali. I mean, when it comes to the situation, the kind of situation we saw in Mali, I think ECOWAS is always reactive, to such situation. But we are looking at it from a more policy perspective, how are we discussing civic space issues at the regional level? Is it a concern, not necessarily from the operations or programs of ECOWAS? But I'm going to leave it there. I believe we still have quite a number of...
No, just quickly. It is a very wrong impression that ECOWAS is only reactive. Yes, the reactive part is what you see, but pre the problem side, there's a lot of work that goes in. So it's not everything that ECOWAS will say, I want to go and jump now. Oh, I would know. ECOWAS is not only reactive. Before Mali, you know that we have a good ECO1 warning, early warning system, and now we're building response. So it's not everything that ECOWAS will do that will be heard. So it's to me, it's very, very wrong that ECOWAS is only reactive. But we don't have time to go into details into that. So this is not the right time. Thank you.
Comments, man. I think you also mentioned that we need to strengthen communication between both entities, ECOWAS and the people. And because I'm part of the NSA conversation, I believe getting the NSA engagement strategy right would actually address most of the ECOPs that we are facing now. Thank you so much. So do we have any other comments? Otherwise, I'm going to invite Ibrahima to take the floor and see to how we close this conversation. Any comments, any hands on the floor? Final questions. We have 4 more minutes, and I believe we can use anything on the chat box. French francophones, please, can you read? Ibrahima, are you there?
Yes, I am. I am here, Omolara.
Yes.
No, I think from my end, I just want to say, thank you for being part of this conversation. And, I think there are some very important points that have been made here. I think the ECOWAS non-state engagement strategy will definitely, be very helpful to get the voices of civil society organizations into the conversation. I think that's very important. And also to the point that we need to have processes to consolidate our points and have channels to communicate. I think we should be doing more things at the regional level because, as somebody pointed out earlier, there is some sort of solidarity between various governments in the region. So there should also be solidarity among civil society organizations if you want to have adequate responses to address the challenges facing the civic space. So the conversation definitely needs to become regional, and I'm really happy that such spaces are available for civil society to discuss. And moving forward, we need to think about very concrete actions. I hope advocacy actions to address the issue. So I'll just pause it here because I know, I'm mindful of time, and thank you so much.
Ibrahima, thank you so much. And I believe this conversation is not over. We are beginning to see the outcomes of the Niger runoff presidential runoff elections, which took place last week. And we will continue to monitor and engage colleagues at the national level to see how we can tighten the advocacy strategy to ensure that citizens' voices are not only heard and their participation are not only felt in electoral processes and democracy generally, but actually that they are able to safeguard their mandates. It is actually the will of the people, and we will see to how we can support in the best possible way as WACSI, and of course with our partners, Civicers and Oxfam across the 5 countries that will be holding one form of elections this year. So please, if there is a last comment or point or ideas, recommendations you would like to share with us, kindly do send it to our email before before we finalize a policy brief that will come out of this dialogue. So please send to our email. You can send to info@waxy.org. Any comment, just say comment to the last webinar. Send it to info@waxy.org. info@waxy.org, and then we will take note of your comment and capture it in the policy brief. On that note, I would like to thank everyone. First of all, Ibrahima, thank you so much for always saying yes to us as Waxy. Ibrahima is an election expert and now turned advocate. So you can't escape conversation like this across the region that you have mastered for quite some years now. Thank you so much. And I also want to thank all our discussants, the speakers, Madi Jobate, who is the representative for Westminster Foundation in the Gambia, and Ms. Blandine, who is the National Coordinator for REPESCO in Benin, and then Dr. Sosa, who is a professor at the University of Santiago in Cape Verde. Thank you so much for sharing your insight. And thank you to Sek Mamadou, our colleague who worked on gathering this information in a research piece for us last year. As Ibrahima mentioned, we're going to share the link to the report to you again, and then you can look at it. If you have any questions or you have other comments, you're free to send it to us at info@waxy.org. To our interpreters, thank you for helping us bridge this, language barriers that we inherited. Thanks so much for your work. Ajia Raima, thank you so much for always giving us audience when we invite you to platforms like this. We know how busy you are. We really appreciate as Waxy, and I believe our partners, Civicers and Oxfam, also do appreciate your participation at this forum. To my colleagues at Waxy, thank you. Appreciate your support all the time. We just killed another one. So we'll see you next month when we'll be looking at leadership and women's leadership, because it's going to be the month of women. So we will definitely lend our voice to global conversation around status convention. CSW, you have these acronyms and you just missed the full meaning. So we'll be having another webinar around CSW. We'll be looking at women's leadership in West Africa, and how we are bridging the gap between the older women who are already holding highest position of leadership and the younger women who are struggling to climb the ladder. So it's going to be another interesting conversation next month. We'll send you the information, and we hope you can join us. Thank you so much, and it's goodbye from us at Waxy. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Merci. Au revoir.
Merci beaucoup. Merci tout le monde.
Merci beaucoup aussi.
Merci.
Et à bientôt.
Ciao.